I'm not rushing anything. I just don't want to be.
Most of us like have the same backgrounds every time. I do. I have the same one. Mike's always, I think, on the couch. Yeah.
Sometimes with the dog.
With the waves in the background.
My son painted that. It's a wedding rock because that's where I proposed to mom. He put some birds, seal. He took his mom later kayaking over there, so it's got some seals and kayakers in the background and Easter eggs.
So how long ago was that when you proposed out there?
20 years.
20 years.
All right. Well, we'll call this meeting the May 19th, 2022 Humboldt County Association of Governments Board meeting to order. This meeting is held in the Eureka City Council chambers, conducted in person and telephonically. And the council chambers are open to the public. And if you cannot attend in person, there is a ribbon across the screen that will show you how to make your public comment. And at this time, we'll ask for a roll call.
Mayor Jones?
Here.
Mayor Seaman?
Here.
Councilmember Avis?
Present.
Mayor Atkins Salazar?
Here.
Councilmember Julie Woodall for
Here.
Rio Dale? Councilmember Jack West? Chair Johnson?
Here.
PAC Member Arroyo? And PAC Member Allstrand. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And at this time, we will adjourn as the HCOG Board and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And our first item of business is a presentation from the Humboldt County Aviation Director on what's happening throughout Humboldt County.
Actually, can I interrupt for just a sec? Natalie just says she's trying to join by Zoom, and she's getting an alert that the host already has another meeting in progress. So if you have a... Perfect. I just want to make sure you knew that.
Thank you. That's important.
Okay, so we'll get them both in. We're able to let them both in.
You want me up here? Right here?
If you turn on the microphone,
Sure.
if it's green, then everybody can hear you, and you won't just be a...
How do you hear me now? All right. Loud and clear if we're talking aviation, right? So thank you guys for having me here today. Mayor Seaman saw a very similar presentation a couple months ago that I gave to another group. So apparently that wasn't painful enough. She invited me. She wanted to hear it again. But no, honestly, I appreciate you guys hearing the presentation. Be glad to answer any questions at the end as far as what we have going on with our 6 county airports. Just before we get going, the county has obviously the ACV airport in McKinleyville. We have Murray Field Airport here adjacent to the city of Eureka. It's actually in city limits. We have the Ronerville Airport just outside of the city of Fortuna, the Garberville Airport in southern Humboldt, and then in the eastern half of Humboldt, we have the Neeland Airport and the Dinsmore Airport. Those 2 airports are a little smaller than the rest, and we'll talk about that here as we move forward. For those of you that don't know me, I'm sure if you read different publications you've seen with some of the moves we've had to make here in the last 3.5 years since I've been with the county. Some controversial, taking on some controversial topics. This is posted at my desk. Just wanted to start with that. And also wanted to let you guys know a little bit about myself and forewarn you. If I say oofta or you betcha or don't you know, I come from the Midwest. I do have Norwegian blood in me, but this is my family, my nieces and nephews back in the Midwest there. Uncle Dodo comes from my niece Jada not being able to say my first name. Most people struggle with the last name, but when she started talking, I forever became Uncle Dodo because my sister won't let that go. Back to business. Where did we start? As I mentioned, I came on board in September of 2018 when the Board of Supervisors created Department of Aviation. Prior to that, our 6 county airports that I covered earlier had been a part of the Public Works Department within the county of Humboldt. Shortly after I was hired, a couple months after I was hired, that FAA compliance letter came in the mail. Ever since first reading that, I have since referred to that as my 17-page love letter from the Federal Aviation Administration. For those of you that don't know, with airports of all sizes, the FAA is the regulatory branch, or one portion of the FAA is the regulatory branch. They oversee us for safety, airspace, all kinds of different matters as it relates to airports. But they're another related branch for the FAA is also the funding branch. And that funding branch had identified 17 pages of issues in the county's past management of their airports, which essentially made us ineligible for future grant funding to improve our infrastructure at our airports. And a few months after we received that FAA compliance letter, we received another letter in the mail. We were notified of a lawsuit that had been filed with similar claims against the county as far as past airport management practices and issues with compliance. Essentially, that lawsuit was a $50 million lawsuit against the county of Humboldt. We have recently had that lawsuit dismissed against us here in the last few months, and I'll cover that a little bit later on. So what's been happening with our aviation department? Well, COVID was a little rough on us, as it I'm sure was for all of your different communities. It was a little different for aviation as an industry as it was for a lot of other industries, in that all industries were impacted by COVID. All communities were impacted by COVID. But aviation had never seen anything like the impacts that came from COVID. If you take into account the economic downturn in 2008, 2009, and what that did to aviation, combined with the downturn that we experienced in our industry from the effects of September 11th, it doesn't even come close to touching what happened to us with COVID. And a good factor in measuring that is passenger statistics. At the ACV airport, with our airline passenger statistics, we were down 95% in April of 2020 compared to April 2019. We had been on this beautiful trend upwards, and then we fell off of a cliff. Just to throw some numbers out there to you, and I have a few graphs coming up to kind of visualize all of this. In the month of April 2020, we had 600 passengers through our terminal. That's 600 passengers in the entire month of 30 days. So on average, we had 20 passengers a day, inbound and outbound combined. And we had most days one flight a day with a 50-seat jet to San Francisco. That 50-seat jet, we had 10 people on average going each direction. So we talk about load factors all the time in the airline side of our business, and you take that's a 20% load factor. Prior to COVID, most airlines were looking for a 70 to 80% load factor to solidify their operations or solidify a route. So that just kind of gives you some measurables on what actually happened to our industry overall, and certainly we felt that. As we came out of COVID, then this happened. For those of you that have been a part of the Humboldt community for a long time, in recent years, these are the three tails that we've had out at ACV here recently. But prior to last year, that first tail you see there is United. That was the only service provider that we had at the ACV airport. When I first arrived in 2018, the LAX service had just kicked off. Prior to that, for numerous years, we only had the United service to San Francisco and a few smaller players in there for the previous years. my third week on the job for the county of Humboldt, I got a call from United Corporate, and they were making the decision to start direct service to Denver. I, of course, notified Supervisor Wilson and the other supervisors right away. A couple of responses I got were, "Wow, you work really quickly," when it was 3 weeks into the job. It is certainly not just me involved in trying to recruit new air services. And it's not just the county organization. It's really all of you and all of our communities and all of the businesses. As our communities grow, as our businesses hopefully are thriving coming out of COVID, all of that is what we utilize to try to attract new air services when we're meeting with airlines. We typically have about 3 to 4 meetings set each year with different airlines. We sign up, and it's kind of a speed dating methodology, if you will. If you care to know more about that, I'll certainly chat with you later on. But it's quite an interesting environment when you get in a room with a couple hundred people, and it's communities like Humboldt County, representatives from them from all over the country, at times from all over the world, and basically begging for a chance to sit down with these different airline representatives and throw our pitch to them. I'm sure many of you know Greg Foster over at REDAC. He's been involved in helping the airport with this for many, many years. We also have some great new partnerships that we've developed with Scott Adair and the economic development team at the County of Humboldt. The board has been very supportive in all of our efforts in trying to recruit these new airlines, and obviously very excited. The ACV passenger picture that I talked about, here's just a look back approximately 10 years of what our passenger trends had been doing. You can see we were riding fairly steady between approximately 4,000 to 6,000 passengers there for many, many years each month. And then we started to climb in that 2018 timeframe. That's no coincidence. We started adding new service. Obviously, our passenger you see a slight dip there in that early 2019 timeframe. And if you look back over the 10-year period and you look at that dip in 2019, that's really our low time of the year. January and February are historically our lowest trending months as far as passenger traffic. That's true for the majority of airports across the country, not just here in Humboldt County. The reason for that, people return home after their holiday travels and typically get back to work and kind of hunker down for those winter months. There are some anomalies out there when you look at airports, primarily in ski resort areas, Vail, Eagle, Colorado, those types of places. That's obviously their peak time of year. And then you see that cliff I mentioned earlier where we just literally fell off down to nothing in April of 2020. We climbed significantly and quite rapidly out of that, but also something to highlight is looking at where that top is here recently compared to that 10-year history. You can see a significant growth. We have had some bad news here recently, and I'll cover that here in just a slide or two. So this was what our picture looked like just even a few months ago. The Reno service with AHA started in November of 2021. The Las Vegas service with Avelo started at the same time. Those two services have recently here, unfortunately, gone away. The Phoenix service will be with us through middle of August. We are continuing conversations with American in hopes, maybe not this year, but in future years to garner that service and get that back for the community. And then the Burbank service is really where the majority of our growth came from. So Avelo started the Burbank service in May of last year, about almost 1 year ago to the day. Actually, it was 1 year ago to the day. I didn't look that up, just that sticks in my head quite clearly. The reason that sticks in my head quite clearly is this was a passenger service that the community had never seen. And it wasn't just the size of the jet that we hadn't seen before. but it was also the type of service. So really what differentiates Avelo Airlines from the rest of those services that you see up there is that they are considered an ultra low cost carrier, or a ULCC. What that means is they have a little bit different business model than your traditional American, United, Deltas of the world, in that they want to provide a low base fare and then provide the customer the option of what they would like to include. So you're charged for things like carry-on and checked baggage and all sorts of other services, selecting your seat ahead of time, sitting towards the front of the aircraft, things like that. But what that provides to Humboldt County is a Uh-oh.
Yes.
As Cody has said, I've heard part of this
There you
presentation.
go.
The meeting's been going on, and so you guys are not connected to it at all? You can't hear anything that's going on? No, we haven't been hearing it. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you did too. So, we're gonna go get some help.
We're trying our first hybrid meeting next week, so
I was in your neck of the woods yesterday. We took a motorcycle ride out to Straw House for lunch
don't know, but I was,
towards Junction City Way. Yeah, and then on the way back, we pulled off in Glendale because there's a shady spot. You get off and then
we do have a
cross the road
quorum,
to where the
and
on-ramp
right now
is,
we,
and on one side is
received our confirmation.
finished our trip.
Yeah, so we're still on the first item, listening to the presentation regarding the airport.
So I'll
Have
keep it
anybody
unmuted,
that's up for election this year?
but as far
Just
as
you?
the video goes,
Myself
we have help
and
coming.
Jeremy.
do you guys want me to hold off from moving forward? Okay. Yep.
It was fast.
Thanks.
I know you're running. That takes me by surprise, I think.
I get blamed for the weather and delays anyway, so we'll put the technical difficulties on top of that.
That is.
I know, she's been on there for 12 years.
So there will be three of you then.
Well, while we're taking a break, can I ask you, what caused the airlines to leave?
I'm going to talk about that here in just a sec.
I'll wait. I'll wait.
But in a nutshell, it was Cody's fault.
Yeah.
I'm up this year and
Just like the technical difficulties.
been on long enough.
That's why I brought you here.
Finally retired.
What's that?
I just brought you here so you
I've been retired for 3 years.
That's okay.
No. But
I'm always open to constructive criticism or even unconstructive criticism, so.
but when I'm in the store, people still come and ask me where stuff is, which I don't know anymore. I know.
No, I never have.
We stopped for the first time.
Yeah.
It's so
Ray's is a
cool.
nice
It's
looking little
supposed to be
store. It's too bad that they're more expensive. I would shop at Ray's.
It's like, it's a huge yellow building, you would know if you drive by it every time you're heading to the restaurant right on the river. And it's a restaurant, it's got like places to stay, Airbnb kind of situation.
And you're stuck.
It's really cool.
So we have land in Trinity Village, which is like, Salyer. So that sounds like it's past it. It's past Salyer, that,
The straw house.
the
Oh, yeah, it's almost to Junction City.
Yeah, I was just wondering, go that far. It's really cool. It's like,
Oh, it is.
we just recently stopped there, and I was like, I wanna go stay there. Have you stayed there before?
No.
It looks like a really fun.
But I've gone in there and had lunch overlooking the river, and you can get hot pizza or sandwiches.
They do what, like you can do a little weddings there or family reunions. It's super cute.
What can I try to help with? So,
So we have a hybrid meeting, and I was told to use my laptop. Okay. And so we have some of the members that are here, they can see any meeting that's going on.
supposed to be really good at
Your laptop usually be used the screen because that's more important than the meeting.
It was sad to hear that Dean passed away.
I've known
Maybe
him.
like someone she knows.
I met him.
She does, but she doesn't have
When I
time.
first met him, I was at Safeway.
Right.
I mean,
That's where I first met him.
and he was the same the
Have you
day I
turned the
met him.
machine on?
This machine?
Last time
I
I
know,
talked to him.
I
He
know.
never changed.
Never.
It's consistent.
Should I put the recess slate up? What's?
Oh, that would be nice. Actually, we'll let you back on. No,
I took my headphones off for a second. I have no idea what's happening.
we're having technical difficulties for some of our people who are trying to phone in.
Okay, thanks.
It's all kind of linked. I'm sorry, I've never done one without being without logged in.
Was that Access Humboldt putting us on recess?
Yeah, he's putting us on recess right now.
Um,
I thought at first the building was being locked down, we were gonna have to leave.
So the world didn't.
Well, that's
I hope not.
unfortunate.
Well, at least it's only positive.
Yeah.
Put this here.
but I have my tea.
His is lower than mine. So.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Jessica. We're in council chambers, and HCAOG is here to do their meeting, and they're not broadcasting because they were told not to use the council chambers computers. Can you come help? That would be great, because their meeting should be in session, and there's nobody here to tell them what to do. Thank you. Bye. Well, that's one step.
Somebody bought it and is setting it up again? Oh my god, and they're doing such a good job.
Steve, how's Robin doing?
Robin? Smith?
Yeah, they're.
Well,
It's pretty.
I saw him today. We met for a couple of hours. He's in good health and happy. We had a great council meeting last night. We really had, it was a good meeting. Lots of conversation. We have a couple of new members who haven't started speaking yet until 2 meetings ago, and now they're really conversing. That's great.
Thanks for helping, Jessica. You're welcome. Just go to Zoom
He
right
was
there.
my doctor for
Oh, really?
10, 15 years
Wow.
or something like that.
Now his daughter is my doctor.
And where is she?
I wonder if you can log into yours on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There you go.
When they opened the one in Fortuna, I was not allowed to. I used to go to Ferndale because that's where Robin
Sure.
was.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I first met him in Fortuna. I just stayed going to Ferndale. I loved it.
Yeah.
And then they told me, no, you can't. You have to go to.
Oh my gosh. Well. Yeah, but that's a good clinic. I'm enjoying it. I enjoy my friendship with him too, so it's nice.
Good.
Recording in progress.
That's all right.
And then just to make people walk, because usually the
How's Jay doing?
Pretty well. Yeah, his wife is ill, as you know.
No.
Yeah,
Oh, I hadn't seen her around town in a long time.
couple 3 months now.
Oh,
And he's losing weight,
oh God, yeah.
which is looking good on him. Lose some weight. But he's also just, but he had a meeting last night. It was good. He was upbeat, talkative, but not overly talkative. It was good. So I'm gonna give him a call tomorrow and just check out more.
Oh, that's sad. Is it fairly serious or? Oh, oh.
But he's been talking about retiring. His contract comes up in June of 23. He may wait till then. He may decide to retire sooner.
How long has he been there now? Do you know? God, that's hard to believe.
Yeah. Which in some respects is great. On the other hand, it's too long.
Is what?
In some respects, it's great. On the other hand, they need to come in.
All right. Natalie, could you give us a thumbs up if you're able to hear us?
So
All right. Looks like we're in business. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's sort of when we first started looking for city managers a long time ago. It sort of bothered me that they moved around. So
Did we
much.
tell Access Humboldt to?
Happens.
Okay.
They somehow-
I can see you also, if that's helpful.
Good. We are ready to continue.
All right. So yeah, I was talking about Las Vegas and the Reno service. Unfortunately, Phoenix is ending middle of August. But rather than just the map and looking at that, obviously we added a lot of dots, as we call it, very complex scientific terminology we use. But also looking at those numbers up on top. So in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the seat change. And what that is how many seats we had available on an average day, taking into consideration all of that growth. And that was looking at 2019, March of 2019 versus March of 2022. And that's 195% growth in the seats that were available each day at the airport. Obviously, this is bad news. We've been really disappointed to hear about Las Vegas and Reno and Phoenix going away. A lot of that service and the reason for it going away are extenuating circumstances outside of our control. Many of you've probably heard about pilot shortages that's been making a lot of headlines here in the last few months. That problem was unfortunately growing and growing and growing in the industry before COVID even hit. COVID hit, there were a lot of different packages and offers that were put out to different pilot groups in the industry for encouraging early retirements and different things like that, that really exasperated and sped that problem up. Also, the industry overall didn't really see the recovery coming as quickly as it has occurred here. And that's a good thing, but it's led to some challenges on the backside of COVID. On top of that, as we all know, filling our vehicles, unless you're an early adopter and you have an EV vehicle sitting outside, I kind of wish I did right now, rather than filling my pickup. But the airlines are experiencing that and experience millions of dollars in additional costs each day. And that has made those two challenges in particular, along with some others that aren't making headlines, has led to them really trimming their schedules back, primarily in the regional markets. And we didn't experience that because we had been doing a really good job overall of filling these aircraft. Not all routes were shining stars, but most of them were. And we didn't experience it along with most of the other communities like Humboldt County across the country because we'd been successful. However, they just cannot continue to provide because of those challenges and other things right now. That doesn't mean we're giving up on those routes. In fact, we're meeting with some airlines here in a couple weeks, and one of those meetings is going to be pitching the Las Vegas market again. So that's, as I mentioned earlier, a constant effort that we're making along with our community partners in trying to expand those services and bring more offerings to Humboldt County. It's also a really big thing, not just for our citizens and all the communities that you all serve, but also supporting those businesses and getting more tourists here and bringing more money into the community and spend at our local hotels and restaurants and other businesses. What do we have going on for construction? So you've maybe heard about the microgrid project that we've had ongoing for the last couple of years up at the ACV airport. That project is really a first of its kind. If you travel often to airports around the country, you might see solar panels at other airports. Sacramento is another example in our Northern California region. They have multiple acres of solar panels and have had for many years at the Sacramento airport. What they don't have is Tesla battery capacity like we have tied to this system here. And that is not because Humboldt County hired some guy out of the Midwest to come out here and manage their airports, and he came with this brilliant strategy to build a microgrid. That's because of some really great resources we have here locally in Humboldt County. Primarily the Redwood Coast Energy Authority, Matthew Marshall and Dana Boudreau and their teams at RCEA have been heavily involved with this. They are actually the owner of that microgrid and leasing the space at our airport. And then the Schatz Energy Research Center over at Cal Poly Humboldt. We've been working together with those two entities for so long. Formerly HSU changed their name in the middle of it. It's been such a long endeavor, but we've been working together basically from my first week on the job and working on getting all of the approvals we've needed from the FAA. That project has been over $11 million. And what that does for our airports, it provides a revenue stream for a plot of land that had basically been empty prior to the development of this microgrid. That revenue stream will be approximately $50,000 in the first 5 years of the 25-year agreement. After that first 5 years, we will be reassessing that in every fifth year thereafter for what fair market value is for that space, and they will be compensating us through a reduction in our energy bill at PG&E. So that's a really big financial benefit for our operation. $50,000 isn't a huge impact on our bottom line budget, but every little bit helps when we can grow revenues or take those expenses out of the equation. The other piece that's really the first of the kind feature for an airport is the resiliency factor that this system provides. There are 3 approximately half shipping container size crates now installed up at the airport. Those 3 crates are each 56,000 pounds, and that 56,000 pounds is 56,000 pounds of Tesla batteries inside each one. The capacity for that is 2.4 megawatts. If you want to know any more than that, I'll have to bring the engineers to talk to you about that. Because again, I don't understand the technical side of how the system works, but what I do understand is we have 3 very old and very large diesel generators up at the airport hooked into our different critical pieces, airfield lighting, the terminal, and our fire station located at ACV. Now that this system is up and running, outside of having to test those diesel generators periodically to make sure they're still running, we should never have to utilize those again. Those Tesla batteries will provide our backup power should we have a public safety power shut off or any other type of emergency. So the really neat thing that Shots Energy did in partnership with RCEA for this project is it was treated as a research project. They got a lot of funding from the California Energy Commission and a lot of funding from the USDA Rural Development Program. And in treating it as a research project, what they really did was build a template for communities across California and across the country to utilize this to try to build their own microgrids and showing how it can be successful if supported financially. So obviously resiliency is a really big thing for us here in Humboldt County. And we hope to replicate this in the future or at least potentially explore replicating it at our other county airports. As I mentioned earlier, we had the $50 million lawsuit dismissed. That officially happened this past January. And yes, I did have a little happy dance in my office when I got that message because my receding hairline and my gray hairs, a lot of those could be attributed to that particular matter. We've also been fortunate in getting that lawsuit dismissed to really kind of flip the script, if you will. If you look at the item above that in the $11 million microgrid project, we were able to proceed forward with that because we did not receive any FAA funds. So we essentially went the last 2 years while we were dealing with this lawsuit matter and the associated compliance matters without taking any FAA grants. So that was 2 years where our airports sat dormant. Don't talk too fast here. Where our airports sat dormant without any major construction being done and investment in our infrastructure. That's 6 airports where we have 7 total runway surfaces. Of those 7 runway surfaces, only 1 of them has been repaved in the last 20 plus years. So we were already behind, and then we had to sit there for 2 years and just continue to let those facilities deteriorate. Now that that is behind us, we are almost closed out with our compliance matter. We are able to take these federal grants on without the concern associated with those 2 issues. And we are taking that task very, very seriously with almost $40 million in improvements planned over the next 2 years. A lot of that improvement will be based up at ACV, but not all of it. We will be touching at least 4 of our airports. Neyland and Dinsmore, we really struggled to get federal funding because of their low utilization and low activity levels. We're trying to change that. I don't know that that will be a successful endeavor, but we are exploring that. But we're working on pavement analysis at our 4 airports along the 101, again, ACV, Murrayfield, Ronerville, and Garberville. And that is really trying to help us set up our future plans and priorities for projects at those airfields. That's also what the airport planning effort listed underneath that is all about. We will be conducting some public meetings here later on in 2022, seeking public input, hence why I put please help us. We'll be hosting meetings here in Eureka for Murray Field, up in McKinleyville at that airport, at Ronerville, and also at Garberville. So 4 separate public meetings kind of laying out what our thoughts and ideas are for the future of those airports. But we want the community's feedback. We certainly will be involving members of the pilot community as we move forward. But our airports aren't just for the pilots. It's for the entire community. And it's not just for the airline up at ACV. It's for the entire community. You all probably have stories or know somebody that's had to utilize our airports in rural Humboldt County. As I often tell the airlines when we're meeting with them, we're on an island without being on an island. And our airports and those runways are often our access to the outside world during emergencies or for medical purposes. So we're also working on approximately $5 million in hangar rehabilitation and reconstruction. We have hangars that were constructed about 12 years ago up at ACV. Prior to 2010, the last hangars that were constructed at any Humboldt County airport were in the early 1990s here at Murray Field, actually. So those are all very, very old and really need a lot of love to get them back up to modern standards. So that's something we'll be investing heavily in as well. Additional staffing, our board of supervisors. I wish Mike was here tonight so I could tell him thanks again. When I first arrived, we had 8 positions for operations and maintenance. These are the people that are mowing the grass, painting the runways, doing surface treatments, and a multitude of other things and responsibilities that they have to keep our airports going. And 8 just isn't enough. I mean, we have 6 airports. We almost had as many airports as we had people. And unfortunately, those people, oftentimes resources, are tied to ACV to meet our regulatory compliance up there. So we've really struggled, especially with staffing issues here over the past year, to get assets down to Murray Field and our other airports. So those are things that we're improving upon. The board recently allocated a 50% staffing increase to us. So now we have 12 positions. We're very close to filling those, and we'll be rolling out a new schedule model, which will allow us to get multi-person crews down to our outlying airports 5 days a week. Here in the past year, honestly, we have really struggled to get even one person down to these outlying airports for oftentimes many weeks in between visits. We have new equipment. We're implementing a new maintenance program. Many components of that maintenance program have never been done before. For surfaces like a runway, they're very expensive to reconstruct or rehabilitate. So you need to be investing in those each year, primarily through crack sealing and other strategies to experience the full useful life of those expensive pavements. We are working with a local entity. That FBO acronym there stands for Fixed Base Operator. We've been in the news here over recent months about Northern Air at Murray Field. Again, that was trying to address some of that compliance history and issues that we had with our airports. But we have a new company that plans to open up a similar facility, but with modern amenities for both pilots that are based here in Humboldt County to utilize, so flight training and other pilot lounges, restroom facilities and such, and hangar facilities associated with that. These are things that pilots experience when they go to airports outside of Humboldt County, and we plan to provide those for our local pilots and also for pilots in general aviation aircraft. We have accepted a bid from Mercer Fraser, they a local construction company, to help us with a runway rehabilitation and electrical project at ACV. We are working on finalizing the funding package and hopefully should receive confirmation here in the next 2 months from the FAA for approximately $18 million in federal funds for that project. What we'll be doing there is strengthening the runway surface and replacing electrical equipment, some of which is dating back to the 1950s through the 1970 era. So things that we cannot properly maintain anymore. We have had some parking lot improvements. We've just recently completed an LED upgrade project focused on our exterior of ACV, and then we plan to invest multiple millions of dollars in really expanding our parking lot capacity up there. The terminal question mark I have at the bottom, we are looking at possibly putting forth about $500,000 to take the next step and planning efforts for the terminal. Our terminal up there was last remodeled approximately 10 to 12 years ago and slightly expanded. When it was done, it was designed to address 30-seat aircraft, which is what we primarily had at the time. Now we primarily have 76-seat aircraft. That's the main aircraft that serves us, a regional jet operated by United. And then, of course, that 189-seat 737. Even the 76-seat, we struggle to have enough space to accommodate passengers and users of the facility. I compare it to a sardine can type feeling in the terminal, though, when we have the 189-seat jet show up. So really trying to improve that customer experience. And if I'm back before you in a few years, if we're successful on this terminal endeavor, you'll hear it again, but really try to roll out that red carpet to the Redwoods for visitors to Humboldt County. This is just a conceptual sketch that we have had put together. We're about to move forward with the design effort, which we'll get into a lot more detail than we're showing here. Part of the microgrid project, which is just off your screen on the right-hand side there, that was included within that was 4 EV charging stations. We plan to include that in that left parking lot, which is to the north. That will be the phase 1 of the development. That's an old, actually used to have a military facility sitting on top of that, and since we've used it for overflow parking. We plan to regrade and pave that and turn that into a paid lot over there. That'll provide us approximately 63 new spaces. And then reconfiguring and redoing everything inside of that loop will also increase our space availability in the paid lot. We're working with RCEA and SHOTS and trying to take not just those 4 in phase 1 for EV charging capabilities, but really expand that out. And RCEA is going to try to chase some funding to really dial that number up in consideration of really that's where the market is going. You don't see any ads anymore for the latest diesel engine. It's all about what different manufacturers are. All right, I have done enough talking, and I'm surprised the mayor is still awake after hearing this for a second time, so I will take any questions from anybody.
Any members have any questions? Yes, Mayor Jones.
Hi, I'm Adeline Jones, Mayor of Blue Lake, and I've used your airport quite a bit because I love to travel, mostly before COVID.
Yep.
When you were talking about the terminal improvements, is there any possibility of having a restaurant put in there at any time in the future?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. Yes, that is something that we are working on a small step forward. We'll be going before the board either next week or a couple weeks thereafter with a recommendation to get the space that Ramon's formerly occupied on the first floor. Well, first, let me say thank you for flying ACV. I should have started with that. But we plan to get that cafe space filled with a local entity that has 2 restaurant operations here in Eureka, and they hope to come up there, and we're excited about that partnership as long as the board approves that. The space upstairs that we used to have, I shouldn't say we, this was before my time, but I've heard a lot about it. The silver lining, we would love to open that space back up. Unfortunately, it's going to take probably in today's dollars close to $1 million just to get that up and running and meet all of the codes, including ADA work needed for getting to and from that space. So we're trying to look towards the future, and certainly if we get what I'm dreaming up right now, which will certainly change with all of the input we get from board members and otherwise, but looking at a second story with a full sit-down restaurant is something we're trying to get for the future. It probably won't happen for quite a few years, but it takes a while to progress on these big-time projects, so we're trying.
Thank you. PAC member Arroyo, has a question.
Hi. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm in Garberville, but anyway, I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and then also share that Humboldt Transit Authority has been communicating with a couple of community members, one in particular who really pointed out that it's pretty hard for people to find information about transit at the airport. And so HTA has been really interested in making sure that we're providing good information at the airport so people can figure out how to get into town. You know, the bus does stop there, but as the community member who we met with pointed out, there just isn't great information yet about you know, where the bus goes, key destinations, and the schedule. So we're going to work on that. But I just wanted to see if you had any other thoughts on transportation into town from the airport and how we can improve that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Natalie, for the question. And that's something that I didn't highlight in the presentation, but that's added to the list of numerous things we're working on to try to make improvements. I actually met with Greg and his team at HTA yesterday. We met in my office and then did a walkthrough of the terminal, just discussing strategies on how we can improve that messaging. So, you know, brochures in the terminal is a part of that concept, and getting more prominent signage out by the bus stop and between baggage claim and to the bus stop are all things that we're working on together with them on. As far as other options for transportation to and from the airport, certainly we want to continue building that relationship and improving the connectivity to HTA, but we're also working on agreements with Lyft and Uber to try to open up those geofences that have been there historically. Like we are in a lot of areas, way behind other communities. A lot of communities have provided this to and from their airports for many, many years now, but we're at almost the goal line of getting those agreements before the board for approval. So we're also in conversations with a couple of other rental car companies that may be wanting to enter into this market, one of which has been here before and the other has been here before, but not for many, many years. So we're hopeful to get those folks in town and really expand on those rental car options for our customers.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it was news to me, honestly, that you, because I always get a ride to the airport from a Lyft one. It was news to me that you cannot take, that currently people cannot be dropped off by Uber or Lyft at the airport. So thanks for working on that too. I definitely learned a lot about thinking through, how would one get from the airport into town readily. It's just not as easy as you'd think, and we want to make sure that those connections are smooth. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? See none right now. I just have one little, I'm going to be traveling in the fall, and I think that you just touched on it a little bit, and everybody else is probably wondering the same thing. Have you heard any rumblings yet about fuel surcharges?
I know that that's been a topic of conversation for different airlines. I have not heard anything specific from the corporate office with United or Avello. Also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the presentation, while I was busy highlighting my nieces and nephews up there, I usually also start presentations with, before we get to the Q&A, I can't get you any discounted airfare. I've always paid full price myself. I've never worked for an airline. I've always worked for an airport. My mistake. But yeah, the fuel surcharge, in all honesty, that I know that's something that airlines are considering, or different airlines are considering. And just remembering that, what you're paying at the pump, imagine filling an aircraft with 1,000 gallons of fuel, not, 20 or 30 gallons like you are for your vehicle. And imagine what that cost is. And while it might seem like you could just raise the airfare, and that might be a strategy, and has been a strategy for some of them already. These airlines went through billions and billions of dollars of losses over the past few years. Certainly our federal government stepped up in a big way to really help them survive and the industry survive. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, Mike's response there, but really we wouldn't have all of these airlines still in existence today. And that's a good thing because that leads to competition, which leads to lower fares. But fuel surcharges might be a part of the future, and they don't have to call me and ask me for permission to put that on your ticket. So I'll gladly take your call, Mike, if you want to call me and complain to me, but I don't have any control over that aspect either.
I know you don't have anything to do with that. I was just curious. I mean, there's about 35 of us flying out of ACV on United, so
well,
we want to utilize our airport.
Absolutely. I very much appreciate that. Like I said, thank you to the mayor earlier. Thank you for and really keeping these airlines, like we were talking about airline retainage earlier. The key to their success is our communities utilizing those services. If we don't utilize them enough, they will go away. So thank you for doing so.
Well, thank you for the presentation, and seeing no more questions, no hands up. Appreciate your time, and thank you for bringing them in.
Thank you
for coming. It was really, I think it's really helpful for us to think about and all the other infrastructure things that we're working on.
Yeah.
And thinking about all of the different airports and knowing that there have been stories in the paper that haven't always really given a broad perspective of the work and why you make some of the decisions you do. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all.
Okay, that brings us to item number 4, this public comment on non-agenda items. And we open that up. Do we have any? I didn't see anything up there, so thank you. We'll close public comment there and come to the consent calendar. We have 4 items: AB 361, the meeting record, the fiscal year 2022 5311 resolution, and the fiscal year 22-23 overall work plan. Does anybody like to pull anything? We have a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we get a vote?
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Councilmember Avis,
Aye.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Julie Woodall,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
Pact Member Arroyo, and Pact Member Allstrand.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. We have one action item, a discussion request for the Eureka Arcadia Corridor project, and Director Burks would like to address it.
Yes, thank you. And I'll start, and then we'll have a Caltrans project manager, Jeff Pimentel. He'll add to the presentation. But so as was described in the first staff report you received, Caltrans has been working to repackage and re-advertise the Indianola Undercrossing project. This was since high bids were received last year when they advertised it the first time. So at this meeting, we were hoping to understand the engineer's estimate and have that complete and bring it for consideration to the board and have a more broad discussion about that, what that might mean for our regional shares of the state transportation improvement program. Unfortunately, we don't have that estimate available. We were concerned that we really needed action by the board this month in order to keep a deadline with the CTC in August. But as we learn every day new information, we may not even need to go to the CTC in August, or if we do, it seems like the June meeting and having a decision at that time won't preclude us from making that August hearing. So there's actually several paths the project could proceed on in terms of when we need to go to the CTC, if we need to go to the CTC, Bottom line is, until we have an estimate, we don't know. We don't know which path we're on. So we do need a little bit more information before we can proceed. I will say that Caltrans District 1 staff has been incredibly supportive. We are kind of unified in requesting that the interregional shares, so rather than our shares that we receive here as a region, but the interregional shares that Caltrans is responsible programming, we're hoping that will cover whatever cost increase is, ends up being the case. So we do have support from Caltrans on that at the District 1 level. They're also lobbying to headquarters. And the next step is we would get, once we know the number, we'll get the CTC involved, the California Transportation Commission, and hopefully they would agree with our approach. So with that, I would turn it over to Jeff and let him give a little bit more details on where we're at with the estimate process, and then we'll open it up for questions.
All right, thanks, Beth. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, your screen. Perfect, thanks.
Yes, we can hear
So thanks for having me. Yeah, as Beth mentioned, we were hoping today to have a cost estimate and a number to be able to point to and speak about to the board today. But we are not quite there yet, but we are getting really close. I am fully expecting with 100% certainty that our cost estimate is going to be of some significance, and I believe it will be significant, higher than our previously allocated amount when we first put the project out to advertise. Our previous allocated amount was right at, just under 49.5 million. And as Beth mentioned to you, the district is unified with HCOG, and we've been meeting with Beth and our management team and myself to discuss various scenarios. It's hard to really move those conversations much further until we do have a number to point to and speak about. So we are hoping that we'll have that within hopefully the next 2+ weeks. So I am expecting to come back to the June meeting to bring that update to the board. There are a few different scenarios that could play out. Option, one, which we are trying, and we have discussed this with our headquarters programming staff just as close as yesterday when we talked with them. We are asking and seeing if there is a path to having the ITIP pay for 100% of the increase, but that's not certain if that would be a successful ask or not. Some of the feedback we're getting from our headquarters staff is that the CTC does in these projects, these SNP projects that have a cost share agreement in place, that that cost sharing is upheld, and both the ITIP and RIP pick up portions of the cost, especially when there are cost increases. But we tried to paint the picture of this area being a rural district, having a lot of challenges with funding projects in the various regions of the cities and counties that don't have a lot of funding sources to be able to tap into to move projects and build projects. Beth did an amazing job yesterday pitching that fact to our headquarters staff, and her and I had kind of pre-met about that, and so I thought she did a really good job painting that picture in terms of the challenges that it brings to HCOG and the agencies and organizations that it represents with cost increases that this project has had historically. Unfortunately, we are dealing with an area where I think as one of my supervisors mentioned yesterday, you couldn't build a sandcastle on this soil. It's that bad. We're just dealing with really poor soil conditions. And I recently had a meeting with one of our consultants recently who's been helping us design this column supported embankment system that you've heard me speak about. And he actually mentioned to me at a meeting that if we were building this undercrossing just a quarter mile in one direction versus where it's being built, we wouldn't even be talking to them about these deep foundation scenarios that we're having to deal with in terms of the column supported embankment. So it's unlucky that we're dealing with the soils we are at this location, but it just is what it is. So we're we're dealing with it, and we should have a cost here soon. And a lot of projects are experiencing this right now. We just had bids on our Dr. Fine Bridge in Del Norte County come in. I believe that the engineer's estimate was around just over 50 million, and our bids came in at about 20 million higher than that. And so that project has its own difficulties and challenges that really is not comparing apples and apples with this project, but the current economic trends and what we're dealing with are things that are a little bit out of our control to some degree, with regards to just inflation on fuel prices, concrete, labor, just everything across the board. So anyway, I guess from there, I'll just open it for any questions the board or anyone else may have on that, or if there's anything, Beth, that you wanted to add or correct me on anything I mentioned.
Okay. Are there any questions? Yes, Councilmember Avis.
Thank you for the update. My question is, it sounds like the soil conditions is contributing a lot to the increased estimated cost. It's not just a matter that materials have gone up since we decided to put it out to bid a second time. Is that correct?
Do you have your microphone on?
I do. Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry,
Okay.
I was on mute.
That's okay. So my question is this: the estimated increase in cost, it sounds like a lot of that is coming because of the new soil conditions that you're discovering and the extra engineering costs to produce that, as opposed to simply the fact that you needed to delay to get out a second bid, and the materials costs have gone up significantly in the meantime. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that most of the cost is related to additional poor soil conditions. That is a component of it. We did have to go out and do some supplementary drilling, and some of the log of borings that we have at, say, Jacoby Creek and other historical borings that we have throughout the corridor had showed that at depth we would typically hit at some depth a dense sand layer. And unfortunately, in this location, we didn't find that. So it was a little uncharacteristic from what we've seen in other locations within the corridor in terms of our experience. So that is some new information that we did gather from this additional drilling that we went and did to inform the column-supported embankment design. When we did our original drilling, the typical way that we deal with and the groundwater and dealing with settlement, which is kind of our big issue here, is just the time that it was going to take originally with our original construction method of just building conventional embankments, is utilizing wick drains to release that poor water pressure and get the groundwater out to allow the settlement of the soil as we build that embankment. And so when we did that drilling, that type of drilling is much different than when you're dealing with deep foundations and deep ground improvements, such as with this column supported embankment system to build that, where we're going to be putting in concrete piles at a significant depth. So that's why we had to go out and do the supplementary drilling. But a large portion of the cost increases are due to this inflationary trends that we've seen with cost increases across materials and labor. That there's definitely some uptick and increase in that trend just over the past year that we're experiencing.
Okay.
When I do get an updated cost estimate, one of the elements of that cost estimate in terms of what I'll be sharing with the board when I come back is a breakdown of where the increases are coming from. So I don't have that information at my fingertips right now, as the team's not done compiling the estimate. But once they are, that'll be part of that package so that we can understand where the increases are attributed to.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Yeah, no problem. Great question.
Thank you. Mayor Jones.
Hi, I guess this question is more to Beth. I haven't seen a Eureka Police Department report recently, and I first of all enjoy them quite a bit. But secondly, I'm interested to see how things are progressing as far as the safety of the corridor and what's any updates on that. So do you have any idea when we might get one of those again, Beth?
Yeah, I can check with them again. I don't think we've got any updates recently because I think that they haven't been able to do the supplemental patrols. So they bill us as they do them, and we also haven't received any bills recently. So I know that they do it when they have available, staffing for that, and sometimes people take on overtime to do those extra shifts. But I'm happy to check in with them and get more details on the circumstances. One of the things, I don't know if you'll remember when we extended that contract for the supplemental patrols, one of the factors we considered was that, when we were going to be going to construction and that there'd likely be supplemental patrols associated with the construction, so we could pare down what we were doing in that case. So yeah, I think we will, we'll look into that and make sure we don't have that gap or if there's a concern about them not being able to provide the patrols now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I know that it does potentially affect a lot of projects that are on the books already and in planning stage, and it's an item that is concern. So we thank you for your report and thank you for keeping us all informed, and especially thank you for your coordination with Executive Director Burks. Makes a good team and keeps us all informed. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
And that brings us to, by request, we would then, by motion, reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations at the, oh, I didn't see any hands up there. Okay, thank you. We do have a public comment online. I don't know, I thought.
We have public on here now.
Okay.
If any public want to make a comment on this item, you can raise your hand. And then it doesn't look like we have any.
Okay. In that case, again, we could, by motion, adjourn as the PAC board and reconvene as the HCOG board and approve the PAC recommendations.
I so move.
Second.
A motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Mayor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Seaman,
Yes.
Councilmember Avis,
Aye.
Mayor Atkins Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Woodall,
Yes.
Councilmember West,
Yes.
Chair Johnson,
Yes.
PAC member Arroyo, PAC member Allstrand.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And now we come to staff and PAC member reports, and the executive director's report is first, and it looks like a little presentation.
Yeah, so I have just a couple of announcements I'll do first, and then we'll launch into the presentation. It's about a 12-minute video. So I did want to mention just that we have several RFPs out. Two of them are regarding the audits. So we have an RFP for performance audits and the fiscal compliance audits. We have a transit development plan update RFP out, and that's looking closely at all of our transit providers. This is a 5-year planning cycle for this document, and we're due for an update. So it's critical for our transit providers to have this in place in order to access the funding that they're looking for. So we're glad to get that updated. And then we also have a legal services RFP out. So quite a few, but just wanted to keep you informed about that. Then the other announcement is that it is Bike Month, and today was actually Bike to Work Day, and that there's bike celebration going on at Jefferson Community Center from 11 to 2 this Saturday. So with that, I'm going to play the video. The video is a video from the Karuk tribe. They produced it. It's pretty applicable to everything we've been talking about and working on, especially in terms of updating the regional transportation. I think it really speaks to kind of the intersections between equity, transportation, climate impacts, and just does a nice job of summarizing all of that. Additionally, the Karuk tribe is a very active member on our TAC, and so it's nice to be able to bring this forward on their behalf. So I'll get that set up.
The wind came up so hard, and it was raining so hard you couldn't hear anything. But it was warm. You could hear the rocks and everything just rolling, and the trees were breaking and crashing. And we were all in bed, and Gary says, "Oh my God, we got to get out of here." And we got out on the porch, and it was just pouring. I mean, it wasn't, you couldn't see drops. It was just pouring. It was like you were under a waterfall or something. And I said, "Where are we going to go?" We had 3 babies at our house. We needed food, and we needed diapers and other stuff. And so every day the helicopters would come in. They'd lower stuff down on a rope for us, you know. We were there for 10 days. And of course, my parents lived over at Camp Creek, and they lost their house.
Transportation is about emergency survival. It's about day-to-day life. This community has experienced intense disruptions to transportation on a regular basis. One really big example of that is the 1964 flood. All of the bridges were taken out. You had a warm rain on snow event in mid-December. And this is the kind of thing that's going to happen increasingly.
People don't think about us in this area. We're kind of forgotten. It does seem annually that the road closes at some point on Highway 96 every year.
Then we all worked together, and we all knew each other. Everybody in the Forest Service, we knew them on first name basis, and same with Caltrans. The communication just isn't as personal, I guess, as it was in those days. You don't know who does what anymore. You don't know who to call.
We spend more hours on the road than a lot of people realize. It's very important for us to stay connected to our cultural centers and all of our ceremonies, our gathering.
As far as like utilizing the resources, the cultural and natural resources up there, people think about like, what are the roads going to be like? Are they going to be icy? Are they going to be snowy? Are they going to be full of rocks, or the slides and stuff like that? And for some things that we just go ahead and do it because it needs to be done, and we're not going to not do it.
Roads matter incredibly for people around here. It's very remote, it's very mountainous terrain. Interruptions to travel from landslides, from fire, from snow and ice, and from flooding happen on a really regular basis. And yet, roads maintenance is less in this area. It's a rural region. It's because of the low population size, people don't get their same prioritization. As climate impacts intensify and all of the agencies that are providing services to this region are under increasing stress, regionally, it's going to be even harder.
We need these roads to get to our doctor appointments, to get to our family, to get from Wairika to Orleans. You know, it's 112 miles of travel there, and it's almost all on 96. Years ago, Highway 96 was actually closed up just beyond T-Bar, and then also over at Aikens Creek. And then Salmon River Road was also closed at the same time. Wow. So, and then there was snow in the high country. So we were isolated for a good period of time. I think it was a couple weeks, and nobody could get anywhere.
This particular report is generated from a grant through Caltrans. It's been really wonderful to have the opportunity to work with Caltrans folks. This report is unique in that it's the tribe that's leading it, and so there's values, perspectives, information that is not going to be present in other reports. There's a lot of emphasis on return of Indigenous management to the tribe's work in general, a lot of emphasis on fire. It's a very proactive approach. It will hopefully also be useful at creating coordination between Caltrans, Forest Service, and the counties. And hopefully it will be useful for the community.
One of the things that I'd like to see an improvement on is communication between cultural practitioners and Caltrans or county roads, as far as like when they maintain the roadsides. People are doing gathering alongside the roads, and there's a lot of resources in those areas that, because of general road maintenance, get destroyed. I think if there were conversations that there could be like timing issues, it's like, okay, can those ditches be dragged like after this flower blooms, or can we go out and gather this specific thing before you do that activity? Maple, Indian potatoes, ferns, whether it's Woodwardia or Maidenhair.
We've done a community survey and spoken to a lot of people over the phone as well. Like, what are the, what are the biggest concerns? And for sure, in this community, the relationship between fire and roads is really significant. A lot of people in this community do not have an alternate access or egress route if their primary one is disrupted.
When the fire in Orleans happened, we drove down the Go Road and we could see flames, just coming up. There was not much communication with anybody because everybody's in crisis mode. And so we didn't know if it was going to sweep up the mountain or not. And we would have had to use a back route out of our place to get away from there. And one of them was open, but the other one wasn't at the time. So, some of the time you don't know if the road's going to be open or not to escape from fire. Fire is a real danger now.
Fire it scares me because you look over the hill and all you see is trees down there. That's a lot of dry timber that can burn. That's the only road out of my place, Is there another way to go out, And if there is, how do I get there? It's just kind of important that you know how to get out if you have to.
A lot of people think of colonialism and the violence that happened in the past. There's historical, economic, and political inequality. And then there's a present day lack of understanding of what people's needs are. And all of those things together work with the climate stressor to make for environmental justice issues here and make transportation really an environmental justice issue.
It gets difficult. I mean, we've got 2 jurisdictions. We've got Caltrans District 1, Caltrans District 2, Siskiyou County, Humboldt County, and then 2 different Forest Service entities. It's just really a lot of communication. We try to communicate, with Caltrans directly. I try to communicate directly with the crew if possible. They've really stepped up with the tribal liaison. They've been great to work with. There's still improvements that need to be made, but they're really doing their best. I think they're really trying.
Humans have been across the landscape since time immemorial. When the Americans and others showed up in this area, how did they go? They used the Indian trails. Where did the Indian trails go? The Indian trails went from community to community and to other places that they would use, all part of their cultural landscape. Now we have our highways, and in many cases, those highways are precisely on the old Indian Trail. So people, get amazed that Highway 96 and 169 downriver, have so many cultural concerns and concern about cultural resources. But the thing is that the highway connects one central place to the next central place. The highway is on these ancient village places.
So the Ikes project, I was approached by Holly, who at that time was working with the tribe still. Caltrans and the Forest Service and the tribe were working on decommissioning a disposal site alongside the highway there, and it's connected to or adjacent to my family's allotment. So they reached out to us and we worked with them to talk about both what would have happened there traditionally and what we would like to see happen there in the future cultural-wise. It's been a rewarding experience to deepen our relationship with folks in all those areas and to see what positive can come out of it when you take the time to develop the relationship, take the time to hear from the people that are concerned and who have an interest in caretaking the land, who feel a responsibility for those spaces. I know we'll see some of it happen, but someday our kids and grandkids and, potentially great-grandkids will have another space available for ceremonial and community cultural gatherings. We've had a lot of destruction and we continue to have destruction, but there is a potential to heal.
It's in consultation and collaboration that we determine what the appropriate activities are. Part of the role that I'm playing is to balance out between those cultural resources and then our highway need, and trying to work with people to come up with a solution to where we're not going to be impacting in an adverse way those things of the ancestor, yet making it so that grandma can get to the hospital. There's been cases where if we just shift 5 feet over, then we're going to avoid, the thing that the people care about the most. When I'm working with the tribes, they have a very intimate knowledge of these ancient places, and they know the landscape much better than I do. And that they also are primary customers for the highway. I don't need to try to look to other places for where my idea set come from. They can come from right here.
The Kuduk tribe has been here for time immemorial, and it's important that the tribe is noted to be an important player in the game of transportation. I just hope that we can improve the safety of our roads, improve the routes to escape from natural disasters, and make everybody in the community feel safer and like they can trust the network of transportation that we have in our area.
It's important for Caltrans and the tribe to develop relationships with cultural practitioners and community leaders. In view of climate change and all of the impacts that it's been having on our communities, in our regions, including our roads and all of our natural resources, I think that the thing that's always important in my mind is to somehow remain people-centered in your decision-making. I know we have to make decisions on the fly or in emergencies, but I think that that's what's always going to be important. How do we center people's use and access and connection to land?
Thank you for that, Beth.
Well, I know someone who's fond of history and interface with today. That was pretty interesting, especially going back generations, pre-1900s, And the way they put it as far as the building of the roads and the interconnectivity. And I want to go to Klamath and take the canoe up river and hear that story also. I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity yet, but that's on my list. Any other comments, questions?
Well, I thought it was really well done, and I was wondering how we can get that out to the rest of the community. Is it on YouTube? Is there some other way people can access it? Because it's really good and it's short, but it makes the points very clearly.
Yeah, I can work on that. I can check with Misty from the Karuk tribe and see how she would like to, allow it to be disseminated. I did get special permission to make sure we could show it here. We've also shown it at the SS TAC and the TAC meeting. And I let her know that we'll be incorporating it. Should we get new staff members, I think it'll be in our, onboarding packet to have them watch the video. Because, I think it was really well done and just does a great job pulling it all together. So, but yeah, I will ask about that, Mayor Jones, and see, how they might, appreciate us helping and disseminating it and let all of you know.
I was going to say, it's so nice to have different cultural views presented in a broad scope. That's something that's fairly new in our society. And these are the kinds of things that one by one begin to really blend all of us who live here and who will participate in this community as equals. And I really appreciate them doing the work and being able to contact with you to show it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We come now to Caltrans reports. I don't know if...
Hi.
Yes.
I just have a couple of quick updates for Last Chance Grade. The Senator McGuire's town hall meeting that we discussed at our last meeting has been rescheduled for July 12th. And there'll also be a mitigation workshop scheduled for this summer. And I wanted to share that Caltrans District 1 has launched a new climate change website. It's at www.caltrans.org. northcoastclimateaction.org. And on that website, you'll find the latest news and maps, opportunities on how you can get involved, and resources. And so we're also looking to come back to this group with a presentation on the sea level rise considerations for the Eureka Arcata corridor at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Well, I will say I was just up 299 the other day and done a remarkable job of moving the veg back off the shoulders, and the wind impacts will undoubtedly be much less than what they were in the last few storms. So, and the highway, where it was redone, is in excellent shape.
I'm really having a hard time.
That's
hearing
because
you.
I didn't turn my mic back on. But I made an awesome statement. No, I was saying that I had just traveled the 299 corridor the other day, and they've done a remarkable job of moving the veg back and removing some of the chances for the wind and storm impacts to the roadway, and just the new section that had been redone, repaved, was in great shape and made a big difference. So thank you guys for all that you've done out there.
Thank you for saying that.
That was worth hearing a second time. Thank you, Mike.
Oh, PAC member Arroyo.
Thank you, Chair, and good job dealing with all the ups and downs of a new format of meeting. I wanted to ask a quick question, if that's okay, of Caltrans about just an update, if you have any more information about the timing of the pop-up plan for Broadway, and could you touch on that a little bit for the benefit of the board?
Yeah, I don't have the latest and greatest, but it was scheduled for the month of May to coincide with May's Bike Month, but it has been rescheduled for June or July. I think it's just a day by day right now, waiting to see how that unfolds, but certainly it has been postponed, but still happening. So June or July.
Thank you. That will be an interesting. I'd like to participate in that too. If nobody else has anything real quick, I'd like to say that on next week on May 27th at Walker Elementary, formerly South School, Kiwanis, in cooperation with Walker Elementary staff, is holding a bike rodeo and instruction time for the students. And in preparation for that, the Kiwanis Club has been repairing bicycles. One little kid didn't even have a seat, rode his bike to school every day with no seat. And with the staff, we're going to teach, just basic bicycle skills plus traffic interface skills, which is, Fortuna may be smaller, but still has traffic. So, and that's a good thing. So anyways, if anybody wants to come down and check that out, we're across the bridge there. That might be something. Come on down. Starts at 8:30 Friday, May 27th, and should be over by 11.
Thank you.
And thank you. And yes, Mayor Jones.
Hi, if we're on item C, PAC member reports, I spoke a little bit with some of my fellow members here about something I'm concerned about. The Surface Transportation Board just made a ruling concerning the Annie and Mary Rail Trail and other Redwood rail trail efforts. I first read it on the Lost Coast Outpost. Surface Transportation Board ruling issues serious blow to Annie and Mary Rail efforts, opens door for coal train interests to make their case to scuttle Great Redwood Rail to Trail. I know that McGuire and Woods are working on this on our behalf, but I'm wondering if we should have something from the board here expressing our support for the Redwood Trail, and any other ideas anyone has about a letter to the Surface Transportation Board regarding this issue.
Anybody?
I know this isn't agendized, so I'll say my report. And my report is that the city of Eureka is working on a letter for the surface, for the finding, and we are going to be reaching out to different jurisdictions, and I will make sure that they reach out to HCOG to develop a regional letter that everybody could participate in, if that's something that you would be interested in.
Yes.
Concise way to get the message out.
Also, I rode my bike to work this morning by way of the North Coast Co-op, and was one of the first people to get my bike checked. It was really fun for the Ride Your Bike to Work days.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions, comments, items?
I just want to add on to what I was saying, that I know it is not an agenda item, so we can't take action, and I think that it should be brought up at the next meeting, perhaps with a sample letter, maybe going along with what Eureka is doing, to see how we can coordinate with them if we need to.
Yes,
Thank
I'll be
you.
happy to get that on the agenda for next time.
Thank you, Beth.
I have an item to bring up.
Okay.
I agree about the letter, by the way. I think it should be agendized for further discussion because I think it's pretty complicated and the implications are significant for various projects in the region. So I think it would be great to agendize that. I'm speaking of the Surface Transportation Board's preliminary decision, but I also wanted to note that the climate action plan is out and circulating, and I know some of you have already seen and given comment on it. But there's quite a lot about transportation in there. And, from an HTA's perspective, I feel that some of the metrics around increasing use of buses could be improved a little. And so I gave that feedback already when it came before our board, but I also see an opportunity for each of us to give input during this public comment period. So anyway, I think I just want to encourage everyone to take a look at that. There, Appendix E has, I believe it's Appendix E, has a significant number of metrics that we're going to try to achieve, and now's the time to weigh in on those and see if those are the right fit for our communities. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at it.
Absolutely. Any other? No. All right. Well, we are adjourned.
Be brought before the grand jury, and the DA should be in consultation with the grand jury to decide if charges should be brought against officers, rather than having the police department review their own cases through internal affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. I believe that citizen oversight committees for law enforcement is a very valuable resource and tool that we can all benefit from a great deal. The Eureka Police Department, in fact, has their own citizen oversight committee, and it's proven to be very effective and beneficial. And there's currently a little bit of a change that's taking place in terms of the composition. I think in terms of the composition of a citizen oversight committee, that it would be imperative to have representatives of all parts of our county. We live in a very large county geographically, and it's important to ensure that everyone is fully represented. Additionally, I think it would be imperative to have individuals that were from the business community, people that were from the government, people that were homeless, people that were from various economic and socioeconomic backgrounds. Furthermore, to have all genders, races, and identities represented on the Community Oversight Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Stacy. What do you consider being soft on crime, and how do you feel you address that concern?
I consider being soft on crime is doing nothing to address the conduct and the behavior of the offender. So I think it's really important that when we address criminal activity, that we look at the individual circumstances involved in a particular case, the crime that was conducted, as well as the particular offender, and taking into consideration the unique set of circumstances that are presented. So for example, are we dealing with a serious and violent offender, someone who has a history of acting out in a violent manner? Is this a person who hasn't responded previously to attempts to rehabilitate and change their behavior? Is this a person that we need to remove from the streets and protect our community? Alternatively, is it a person who has never offended before and perhaps they're youthful and they would be amenable to treatment and rehabilitation? That might be someone that we would address with, diversion programs or other alternatives to help divert them out of the criminal justice system. So being soft on crime is ignoring our community and not protecting our community.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
Thank you. Being soft on crime means not having a strategy to prioritize the different crimes. When every case is treated like an assembly line, then they're not getting down to what is going to prevent the behavior in the future, what is going to hold the defendant accountable. That's being soft on crime, not having a plan and not having a bigger strategy to do what is necessary to keep our public safe. With a 30% increase in violent crime, we need different ideas, and the way that we do that is by prioritizing cases. And we don't hang on to cases for so long that we end up with a worse resolution down the road. It is about considering the fundamental job of a DA, which is to have a strategy and consider societal's interest as the most paramount thing.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
I think being soft on crime has a lot to do with our overuse of the probation department. I think offenders should serve their sentences mostly up front, should not rely on probation. I would eliminate the use of no opposition to probation plea bargains and also quid pro quo plea bargains, and ensure that every prosecution and case that is worth prosecuting will involve some amount of jail time. If it's a small amount or a large amount, depends on the gravity of the crime. But the overuse of probation is what powers the revolving door that people talk about. Because what happens is, instead of making people front the time they owe society to pay their dues, they end up being violated over and over again for smaller things like not being at the right place at the right time, having a dirty drug test, or not checking in, which aren't even criminal behaviors to begin with. So we need to make people serve their sentences up front.
Thank you. The next question will start with you, Adrian. We had a couple of questions about budgeting and your expertise in hiring, delegating, and budgeting and staffing in the DA's office as part of the job of the DA. Can you talk about your experience in that area, please?
Absolutely. So I don't have any experience in staffing whatsoever. What I do have experience in is leadership. Leadership to make an entire plan come through by recognizing people's strengths and weaknesses and bringing them together, like I did with the Criminal Environmental Task Force. And in terms of budgeting, what I plan to do is have a very strong business manager that actually does the accounting. And using that business manager to do the accounting part, that's a job that I'm not as strong at. I'm not an accountant, but having a good accountant that can help, what I ultimately make the final decisions on how the resources are used, and those resources are used in a way that is going to prioritize my agenda, which is to implement plans that are going to make our community safer because they've been proven to work at other places and get away from the same old thing.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. So I've had a lot of experience working on the budget, and in particular in recent past we were able to address reallocation of funds and resources so that we could pay our support staff a higher level of what they deserve in light of the really high stress, high impact job that they undertake and the
fact of the matter is that without our support staff, we couldn't do the work that we do for the community. So the budget within the district attorney's office is very large. About half of it comes from the general fund. The other half comes primarily from grants and as well as Measures D funding. In terms of personnel issues, I've unfortunately had to deal with a number of personnel issues, and I've even had to address performance issues, conflicts amongst folks within the district attorney's office. And in terms of the leadership that Mr. Kamada has referenced in terms of the environmental task force, I think it's important to note that the environmental task force existed long before Mr. Kamada was a deputy DA. So that is something that I do feel that needs to be pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
Well, at 51 years old, I'm the oldest candidate. I'm also the most experienced overall attorney, having practiced well over 20 years in more than one state and several tribal jurisdictions, federal courts, federal appellate courts, state appellate courts. I've been a managing attorney at Dakota Plains Legal Services in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, an Indian reservation. I've been the executive director of the Bear River Gaming Agency here locally with the staff and budgetary concerns. I've had to do hiring, firing, performance evaluations, and all aspects of human resource management. I think that retention in the DA's office is best served by a more egalitarian income or salary range. But I think the district attorney's salary is too high and should be redistributed. At least half of it I would redistribute to the other deputy DAs in the office in order to promote their retention and to show them that we're all on the same team.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Michael, for this next question. There have been controversial cases in the past. How would you handle these types of cold cases?
Question is about controversial cases or cold cases. I'm not sure how the two relate necessarily, but controversial cases would be handled as any others. I don't think that the district attorney's office should be doing press releases on controversial cases. I think it poisons the jury pool. We have an ethical duty not to do so. I think that we should keep cases out of the limelight as much as possible. If a case is newsworthy, the independent free press should approach the district attorney's office and ask for comment. It shouldn't be the case that the district attorney's office is proactively putting out press releases and prejudicing the jury pools of controversial cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Your answer, please, Adrian.
In terms of controversial cases, I think it is the role of the district attorney to take the lead and not pass that on to a deputy. The controversial cases need to be shown to have a signal to the community that this is really important. This is what happened during the murder of George Floyd. We saw how the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota sat at council table to symbolize that this is an important case to the people. And I think that's a very important thing. In terms of press releases, as Mr. Acosta was talking about, obviously there shouldn't be any sort of press releases or anything that would in any matter prejudice the defendant ever. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. Any case should be handled appropriately by following the law. So in assessing a case and evaluating whether it's something that we can proceed on prosecution, we have to assess the admissible evidence and make a determination regarding whether a crime can be proven based upon the admissible evidence. So controversial or not, it doesn't impact the rules and the laws that we must file in order to ethically handle and prosecute cases. We shouldn't make our determinations based upon public sentiment or emotion. I think it's also important to note that since Mr. Kamada's termination from the district attorney's office, we have a team of experienced, qualified, ethical prosecutors, each of whom is very well equipped to handle serious cases, murders, homicides, sexual assaults. I'm very proud of the team that we have, and I have full faith that they will be able to handle the most complex of prosecutions.
Thank you. We're going to stay with you, Stacy, for the next question. What is the case that you have personally handled that had the most impact on you?
It's absolutely impossible for me to make a determination which cases had the most impact on me. I've handled a number of cases that are of the most sensitive of nature. Primarily, my caseload involves homicides as well as sexual assault and child sexual assault and molestation cases. Each of those is very sensitive, involving individuals whose lives have been deeply impacted by the criminal conduct of their offenders. I've had the benefit of working very closely with a number of families and victims and survivors, and I've gotten to see them grow and heal and move through the criminal justice system. It is one of the most rewarding aspects of my job to help support and treat victims and survivors with compassion and the respect that they deserve. Sadly, they don't always get that in our criminal justice system, and that is something that I have been committed to providing from the beginning of my career, and I will provide it throughout as district attorney, and I will expect that of all of my deputies and everyone that appears on behalf of the people.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
I think the case that's affected me the most in practice has been the People versus Nicholas Legal, which was a murder case. My client was charged along with 3 other co-defendants. He was falsely charged. He was guilty by association only. He didn't have any part in the stabbing of a young man. And despite 2 judges who were visiting judges in Humboldt County dismissing the case, the district attorney's office filed that case 3 times against this young man. And anyone that knew Nick knew that he was not the leader of a criminal enterprise like they were alleging. He was a very nice young man, and he is free today because we were able to get that dismissed a 3rd time. But it just highlighted what happens when personal vendettas get involved with prosecutorial decision-making. Because after 2 judges had dismissed the case, there's no way that a 3rd bite at the apple should have been given. And Marilyn Miles agreed with that assessment, dismissed the case a 3rd time.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
Yes, so homicides have got, for me, are a situation where you're dealing with family members that are grieving, and you have to carry them through a system that is often cumbersome and difficult and has a lot of rules that they don't understand. So being able to shepherd them through the system is one of the most important duties that a district attorney can have. And I did that in People versus Harrison, the murder of Robert Holtzclaw. Each date, the daughter of Mr. Holtzclaw as well as Mr. Holtzclaw's sister were there. And I made sure to spend a lot of time with them, let them know what was happening at each step. Same thing in the case that I did in the homicide of Jesse Simpson when he was murdered by Eric Lively. Those cases where you have to help people through the system that have lost someone, those are very, very difficult. And so it comes from a position of being empathetic as well as smart about how you handle it.
Thank you. Remember, the number to call with your questions, 707-445-0811. For our next question, we will start with you, Michael. What is diversion, and do you support it?
Well, there's several types of diversion. When they say the term diversion, there's statutory deferment of judgment, which is something like PC 1000 that's been on the books and is utilized for first-time drug offenders. There's deferment of prosecution, which is is much less used, and so either of those can be a form of diversion. Diversion is when we do not prosecute the case in exchange for or in favor of some sort of utilitarian betterment of the offender. Diversion is fine. It's offender-centric. I still am a believer firmly in the retributive theory of justice that if you do the crime, you should do your time. So it's not my first choice. If something's worth prosecuting, people should be doing jail time. If there's no jail time eligible for it, it shouldn't necessarily be prosecuted at all. It's not a social service agency. It's not a 12-step program. It's the prosecutor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Your answer, Stacy?
Thank you. So diversion is essentially where the district attorney actually files charges within the criminal justice system. A case is created, and then if there's a statutory basis for diversion, that might be triggered. For example, mental health diversion, veterans diversion, child abuse diversion programs, as well as diversion programs geared towards drug and substance possession and users. Also in the works, we have the tribal diversion program that we're working on developing a memorandum of understanding with the Yurok tribe, as well as we're hoping that we can incorporate other tribes into that once there's a legal agreement that is acceptable from the court's perspective. So with diversion, rather than going through to the point of being convicted, an offender can have the opportunity to receive treatment and services to change their behavior and ideally not have a conviction that lands on their record. So it's a great opportunity for offenders, and it's a great opportunity for everyone.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
So Mr. Acosta and Ms. Eads both talked about the statutory diversions. And yes, there are those statutory diversions that exist. There's also a way as a district attorney of doing diversions before filing. You can also do diversions after filing by using their discretion. Pre-filing diversions, they should have an agreement. There should have a victim. If a victim is involved, that victim should have to agree to the diversion. But a pre-filing diversion can be very effective. I plan to implement a community-based one where we look at elements of restorative justice for low-level and misdemeanor crimes, again, trying to steer people out of the criminal justice system. Those will also be very consistent with the tribal court diversions, where they can have culturally appropriate programs and resources that they can, again, try to keep people from having convictions, which often perpetuates crime once you're in the system.
Thank you. We'll stay with you, Adrian, for the next question. What is your approach to addressing repeat offenders?
So with repeat offenders, one of the main things is that we're going to have a very specific agreement with the courts, with the judges. This is one that can't be handled in a way that is pre-filing like I was discussing before. We're going to have to figure out a plan that it comes with an agreement also with the public defender's office. It has to be all the criminal justice partners coming together to figure this out. What I would propose is that when somebody has committed a theft or vandalism multiple times within a year, once we get to 3 offenses within a single year, that there be time that is actually asserted into the jail. So they're actually spending time in jail if they cannot find exit ramps like through treatment or elsewhere. There needs to be actual punishment. There needs to be jail time.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
I think it's really simple. We eliminate probation entirely. The legislature has already started this process last year with the passage of AB 1950, which lowered felony probation terms from 5 to 3 years and misdemeanor probation terms from 3 to 1 year. I think that's a step in the right direction, but it didn't go far enough. I think the district attorney's office has a lot of discretion in settling cases. The 90% of cases which are settled by plea bargains, in those, none of them should involve probation if the DA has any say about it. They should involve jail time up front if the case is worth prosecuting. If it's really something we should be prosecuting, let's give some jail time up front, not rely on probation, because probation is the gateway to the revolving door.
Thank you. Your answer, Stacy, please.
Thank you. So repeat offenders are exactly what it sounds like. And one of the things that we at the District Attorney's Office, DA Fleming and myself, have proposed in collaboration with the Sheriff Hansel, is a chronic offender program where those offenders that we identify that are low-level offenders, so they're committing misdemeanor offenses, but they're doing so repeatedly while out on the streets, and there's minimal accountability for the commission of their crimes by the courts. So for those identified chronic offenders, what we're asking the courts to do is to impose significant jail time. We know who the offenders are. We know who are repeatedly committing the rampant theft throughout our community, targeting our businesses and our community members. And we think those folks need to sit some time in jail.
Thank you. Please remember, call in your questions, 707-445-0811. We'll start with you, Stacy, with this next question. Please share the organizations that are supporting your candidacy.
I am supported by the labor unions, 2 separate labor unions. I'm also supported by a number of individuals that work for the district attorney's office. And why that is so significant and important to me is that those are the people that see me on the daily basis. They work with me, they know my demeanor, they know how I handle people in the work environment, and they know how I handle my cases. They know I work hard, they know that I'm ethical. So having the support of all of the lead experienced prosecutors, as well as the vast majority of our support staff, our chief DA investigator, her senior DA investigator, Sheriff Billy Hansel, retired Sheriff Mike Downey, as well as retired Detective Ron Holcomb. Those are some very valuable endorsements that I have, as well as members throughout the community, people from all spectrums of the political view. This is a nonpartisan race, and I think it's very important that everyone is fully represented by the DA.
Thank you. Your answer, Adrian?
Well, I agree with Ms. Eads that this is obviously a nonpartisan job, and that we should have we're going to be doing the job for everybody. And so having broad support is important. I am supported by and endorsed by the Yurok tribe, the Democrat Central Committee, the Progressive Democrats, the Green Party, also some of the most conservative leaders in our community as well. Environmental groups, their coalition has also endorsed me. The Central Labor Council of Humboldt and Del Norte County has endorsed me. ASME, the union group for all of the county workers, has also endorsed me. I'm also proud to have endorsements from within the district attorney's office, including majority, I believe, of the investigators, as well as deputy DAs, and lots of law enforcement officers. I have more law enforcement support than my 2 opponents combined.
Thank you. Michael, your answer, please.
Well, I think my base of support comes from the poor, the disenfranchised, and the downtrodden of Humboldt County, and certainly anyone who's been subjected to the criminal justice system of Humboldt County, whether they were guilty or not. Maybe particularly those who were not guilty, who had to suffer the system and the stigma of the system when they were falsely accused. I also have support from individual tribal leaders that I've come into contact with: Eileen Meyer of the Bear River Tribe, Richard Haberman, the first chairman of the Yurok tribe. But I really think that this, my base of support would be anyone who believes that the system is broken and that priorities need to be changed so that money is conservatively spent on putting violent criminals and property criminals in jail. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll stay with Adrian for the next question. It's about drug offenders. What will be your approach to drug offenders? Particularly, how would you deal with low-level drug offenders?
So we're talking about low-level drug offenders. PC 1000, which Mr. Acosta had mentioned earlier, is a statutory diversion that's mandatory that the district attorney's office, when charging a simple possession of drugs, tell at the time of arraignment, the first step of the criminal proceedings, tell that defendant if they're eligible for PC 1000. PC 1000 essentially diverts the person from the program, and they have to do some education and as well as get an assessment. If they successfully complete those things, then their case is dismissed. I do think that there is a number of low-level street dealers that I think that are supporting their habit that would benefit from a similar type of diversion program that is more strenuous. But we really need to try to get as many people out of the system as possible, and I think those programs do that.
Thank you. Your answer, Stacy?
So PC 1000, the diversion program for possession of narcotics is simply what happens now in court, and I don't see any reason why we would change that. So it certainly gives offenders the opportunity to engage in rehabilitation and treatment to address their substance use, and to have the opportunity to not have a criminal record based upon the simple possession. So I think it's a successful program, and I don't see a reason why we would change that. I think it's different when we're talking about dealers. of narcotics, and as well as when we're talking about dealers in particular that are dealing fentanyl. As we all know, the overdose rate for fentanyl is extremely high. It's very dangerous, and it's plaguing our community and killing members of our community. And so I think that's a issue that we really need to address head on.
Thank you. Your answer, Michael?
Well, once we start talking about rehabilitation and diversion and all of these other things, we're really not talking about prosecutorial functions. We're turning the prosecutor's office into a social service agency. I think if cases are worth prosecuting, they should be worthy of jail time. And I don't think low-level offenders should receive jail time. I think that a policy of confiscation of the drugs straight off the street accomplishes the goal of removing the drugs from the street, and at the same time is the cheapest alternative, because once you talk about prosecution, you're talking about many tax dollars. Once you talk about putting a low-level offender of drug laws into jail, you're talking $106,000 a year that we pay for inmates' housing. Do we want to spend any of that, of those beds and the cost of those beds on low-level drug offenders? This addiction disorder is a medical issue. Let's put it back where it belongs, in the medical industry, and keep the prosecutor's office reserved for prosecuting cases which deserve jail time.
Thank you. Michael, the next question. Our community is hard hit by ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. How do you think you can address that as the DA?
That's an interesting question. I think that certainly taking into account, first of all, the victims' ACEs is important, so that we are sensitive to those issues and give them a voice in the courts. That's the first job of the district attorney's office. With respect to offenders, I think that there is some room for adjustment or deviation from what should be standardized jail sentences for people who get prosecuted. And that deviation should be, if they do have documented child trauma, that there should be some consideration of that in sentencing. But it should also be standardized. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
I think when we come to this issue, we really need, this is a critical issue in our community. We have far too many children in our community that are falling through the cracks. I think that when we talk about ACEs, we should be thinking about solutions that are addressing things like trauma, addressing things like economic opportunities, and stress. So therapy, education, health needs, that is where we need to be focused when it comes to this, because it gives us an opportunity, again, to have an opportunity to get rid of this generational cycle of families that engage in criminal behavior, criminal conduct. So let's do everything we can with therapy and education.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. ACEs is a tremendous problem here in Humboldt County. So for ACEs, it can be all sorts of circumstances, from violence in the home, the lack of stability, a caregiver who abuses substances, the absence of a parent, the absence of a caregiver, being subjected to violence, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. The result of ACEs for folks that have higher numbers of ACE experiences can be ultimately education insecurity, housing insecurity, but chronic illness, substance abuse, lifelong challenges. But with intervention, like we do with the Child Abuse Services team, removing the violence from the home, providing security, providing emergency shelter, providing emergency services and food and transitional housing and security for a child, we can have a direct impact on a child who may be suffering from ACEs exposure.
Thank you. We'll begin with you, Stacy, with this question. What would you do to prevent white supremacist violence in our community?
Any incident of white supremacist violence that comes across my desk that's investigated and reported would absolutely be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I would handle that as a hate crime, and there would be absolutely no forgiveness for those types of crimes. So I would handle those types of matters by serious, full prosecution based upon the evidence that was admissible before court, as well as what the particular types of violence and acts we could prove and what the particular crimes were. But there's no room for that type of hatred.
Violent crimes, all violent crimes, to the fullest extent of law. With hate crimes, there are enhancements that can be applied. I think it's important to look out for, in the area of white supremacy, crimes that are not only committed against people of color, but can be committed against people of different sexual orientations and against white people who are supporters of people of color. We need to be looking out for those cases proactively to make sure that we're not missing any hate crimes and to be able to be ensuring that we're applying those enhancements where they're appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
I agree with both of my opponents here. This has to be, obviously, whatever the underlying offense is, there needs to be the enhancements for hate crimes. Those can be difficult to prove. So I think one thing that I would do is train law enforcement about the elements of hate crimes and go over the legal standards that we must prove. And I think that is one thing that there's a little bit of a gap right now, is that we really need to paint a bigger picture of that person's history and look at the specific facts that can help us prove that the crime that was committed was based on a desire to hate based on someone's either ethnicity, their race, or religion, or gender identity.
Thank you. This will be our last question, and we begin with Michael. What are the most important challenges facing the prosecutor's office?
The most important challenges of the prosecutor's office are priorities. Priorities are screwed up. We have the most incarcerated country in the world. We have the world record for incarceration, put that another way. We have 4 times the incarceration of Russia at this point. We have more incarcerated people than China, and they have a population that's 4 times our size. Reconciling that with the fact that we're not in the top 10 of the safest countries in the world is the major job of the prosecutor's office. If we are the most incarcerated country in the world, we should be the safest country in the world also, and we're not. And that has a lot to do with our priorities. It has a lot to do with transparency. It has a lot to do with too many resources going towards nonviolent crimes and not being focused on violent crimes, making our communities safer, and property crimes, which really lower the quality of life for all of us in Humboldt County, and which are often traded off for more lucrative revenue opportunities of drug cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacy, your answer, please.
Thank you. The priority of the District Attorney's Office is to enforce the laws to ensure public safety. In doing that function, the District Attorney, in large part, the duties and obligations are outlined and dictated by the law. So we enforce the law based upon the law. And we must do so with integrity, with ethics, and applying good reasoned logic and experience based upon handling of cases, working with families, working with victims, hearing, listening, gaining input, gaining insight. So it's very important that as the district attorney that we hear from our community and prioritize and enforce the laws of our community to ensure that our public is safe. Humboldt County is our home. We need to feel safe and protected here in our home.
Thank you. Adrian, your answer, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that one of the key things is prioritizing cases, having a strategy to do that. With the skyrocketing crime, we cannot continue with the old ways of doing things. We need to adapt programs that will cut off people from continuing into the system, being in that revolving door. That is where it has to be key. And that where we need to focus those efforts is in young adults and children. We really need to put all of our resources there to get those folks out of the system is going to have a long-term effect. I think that is what is essential to looking at a long-term impact on reducing crime and having a strategy to prioritize so prosecutors aren't sitting around waiting to do low-level felonies all day when they have murders, rapes, sex assault towards children cases. There really needs to be a strategy, a clear strategy.
Thank you. Now we will hear closing statements from each candidate. We had questions that we didn't have time for, questions involving cash bail, reducing costs in the DA's office, racism, law enforcement fatal use of force in the local police, and child offenders being tried in adult court. Candidates, you may wish to address these topics in your closing statements. We'll now hear a closing statement from Michael Acosta.
Thank you. Well, I am a reformist candidate that is not like the other reformist candidates you've seen nationally. I am not a decarceral reformist candidate. I believe that it's not about having less people in jail. It's about putting the right people in jail. We do need to reconcile the fact that we are the most incarcerated country in the world. We're not the safest, but there are plenty of crimes in Humboldt County and plenty of people that should be subjected to incarceration who are committing egregious crimes against persons and property. Unfortunately, many of them go unpunished because of trading that goes on behind the scenes. This is information the public never has because there's no transparency in these areas. But there is significant trading, commerce going on between the DA's office, law enforcement, and criminals who can provide information for more lucrative revenue opportunities of forfeiture eligible cases. And I think that that needs to be addressed. The reality is, I'm here to tell you that until that's addressed, the public will never understand why we have rising crime and so many people in jail. And that is one of the key factors, is transparency of the government. The federal government does produce statistics on how many criminals they work with and how many authorized crimes that they authorize, called otherwise illegal activity. The local government does no such thing. The public has no idea how many criminals are on the payroll of this local government. And until that is exposed, you will never understand why crime is going up. And we have so many people in jail, but we don't feel any safer. So a vote for me would be a vote for transparency and straightening out the priorities. People who do the crime will do their time regardless of who they are or who they tell on. And if it's not worth putting someone in jail, we're not going to prosecute it. Thank you.
Thank you. Stacey Eads, your closing statement now, please.
As Assistant District Attorney, I am the only candidate who has over 20 years of experience prosecuting crime. I am the only candidate who has an untarnished record of serving ethically with integrity. I have the support and the recognition of a well-established reputation of serving and appearing, being professional, working compassionately with the courts, working compassionately with the victims I serve. I will continue to serve compassionately, seeking justice with respect. I have administrative and management experience as well. I'm committed to serving with integrity. I'm the only candidate who has ever prosecuted a law enforcement officer. Nobody is above the law. I will uphold the law, I will enforce the law, and I will do that to ensure that Humboldt County is a safe place. Since Mr. Kamada's termination from the District Attorney's Office, we have a good group of experienced prosecutors who are able to obtain convictions. Mr. Kamada's conviction record is deplorable. When he was working as a deputy DA, he had a 33% conviction rate. That means nearly 70% of his cases resulted in acquittals. He wants to talk about transparency. He doesn't share that information. He wants to take over the lead cases, the big cases as the prosecutor. He doesn't have the experience. He doesn't have the ability to successfully try serious cases. This is dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. If Mr. Kamada is your district attorney, you will not be safe. as your district attorney, I am committed to continue to serve with integrity, upholding the law, following the law.
Thank you. Your closing statement, Adrian Kamada.
Thank you, and thanks for holding this event and giving us an opportunity to speak to the public about this important decision. First, just to address a couple of things really quick that you had raised on the questions about things that weren't addressed. For juvenile cases, I think we should treat children like children. Most children or most people's brains don't develop until they're 25. There's very limited circumstances where I think we should move in juveniles into adult court, if ever. In terms of racism, I think that we have a very big problem here, and we need to use the tribal courts as much as possible. About 6% of our population is Native American, and about almost 26%, I think it's 25 to 26% of the people in the jail at any given time are Native American. So we have a big problem there. So we need to use those tribal courts. I'm asking for your vote because we need change. We have skyrocketing crime all around us, and Ms. Eads wants to put her head in the sand, pretend that doesn't exist, and continue with the old ways of doing things, and is basically hoping that her attacks on me with numbers that are not true. 33% is not a true number. I am the only out of her and me, I'm the only person that's done homicide cases, homicide jury trials, and I've won all the ones that I've done. So that is a misrepresentation, and I think it's very interesting that she spent most of her time this evening attacking me rather than giving the folks what she'll do as a DA. We need change, we need it now, and I'm going to be decisive, accountable, and I'm accountable to the people, and I am going to make sure that our system is more equitable, more effective, and more efficient. Please vote for change, please vote for me, and I will prove to you folks that it is the best decision to make.
Thank you. This concludes tonight's program. I'd like to thank KEAT TV for airing this forum to help voters be better informed about their voting choices. Membership in the League of Women Voters is open to all women and men 16 years and older. If you would like more information about the League, please call 707-444-9252 or go to our website at lwvhc.org. Our website includes a complete schedule of upcoming candidate forums as well as additional information about our League. KEAT TV will be airing candidate forums on Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. The next forum is Monday, May 23rd for Recorder County Clerk Registrar of Voters. Following that, on Wednesday, May 25th, Arcata City Council. And in conclusion, on Wednesday, June 1st, the Superior Court Judge. I'd like to urge all of our viewers to consider contributing to KEAT TV. It is through viewer memberships and contributions that KEAT TV can continue to present these programs, which are so important to our community. I'd like to thank those of you who took the time to email or phone in your questions. We have all gotten a clearer picture of the issues in our community because of your questions. And finally, I'd like to thank the candidates themselves for taking the time from their very hectic schedules to answer the questions of the voters. Thank you also for having the dedication to democracy to run for this important office. Thank you all for watching, and please return your vote by mail ballot through the U.S. mail, into a secure drop box, or any polling place, or vote at your precinct on June 7th. Power is in your vote. Good night. Thank you.
We care about the things that are going to affect the lives of each and every American.
What we normally see in these big crises, from the United States to Europe to China to Russia,
we can go deeper and get nuanced takes on things and allow people to see that everything isn't necessarily black or white.
For Sama, for me, it's not a film. It's my life. Sama.
It remains a fast-moving story. Climate change, healthcare, immigration.
To peel back the layers of the onion and to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
We're talking about very big dollars here.
It's guaranteed that the numbers of cases in coronavirus will be going up.
We're a place that people can come not just to find out what happened, but why it matters.
My name is Harry Lynch. I'm the writer, director, and producer of Now Hear This. Now Hear This takes you to locations like you've never seen before and brings you great music from our most celebrated composers. To Vivaldi. Cheers. It's a chance to see and hear a lot of new and amazing things. PBS is the perfect home for this. There's no other network in the United States that does this kind of content. Programs like Now Hear This could not happen without your support. I'm a member of my local PBS station, and I hope that you will become one too. Thank you.